Namaste to one and all. Today is a very auspicious day for all of us. Let us make it more interactive. If there are any questions, you can stop me in between and then ask me too. 26th November, almost a century back. It's almost 96 years since 24th November 1926. Is one of the greatest spiritual accomplishments of Sri Aurobindo in his spiritual journey took place. Since then, we have been observing it as one of the important days, one of the significant days, and we are connected with Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And I really don't know how many of us really understand the significance of this day. Yes, we know superficially that to most of us, superficially we know that it is the descending of overmental consciousness into the very physical of Sri Aurobindo. But what exactly do we mean by that? Did it happen suddenly on that day? It was Mother actually came to ashram. Her final arrival was in 1920s. So merely after coming, 6 years after the coming of the Mother, did this happen? Or was there a preparation earlier? What exactly do we mean by that? And what exactly is the role of the Mother in the whole, in this whole journey of Sri Aurobindo? We all let us look into that and then try to understand what exactly is the spiritual significance of this particular day. We need to connect various experiences and then different stages Sri Aurobindo, since his birth, underwent, let us say between 15th August 1872 to this day, or 1926. What exactly it happened? So we all know how Sri Aurobindo, born on 15th August 1872, at the age of 1879, he was sent to Manchester along with his two brothers, took care by Druitt family. Then he goes to St. Paul's. He was admitted into St. Paul's, London, then into Cambridge University. And during his stay, the first, after reaching Manchester, when he was with the Druitt couple, for almost 6 to 7 years, they taught him at home. Mr. Druitt was an authority in Latin, Greek, and several other languages. He taught him Latin and Greek, and Mrs. Druitt taught him history, geography, and other several interesting things. We all know this. So it was actually on 6th of February 1893 when Sri Aurobindo came back to India when he was 21 years old. He came to India, he landed at Apollo Bandar. And then the moment he says, he puts his first feet on the soil of India. And then we know that he said a vast calmness descended. And that stayed for a very long time. And a kind of, it was as if a mother welcoming her son with impeccable love. That's what Sri Aurobindo uses. So till such time, till 21 years of his age, Sri Aurobindo had no clue what Indian tradition is. He had no clue except some very broken Bengali. He did not know any of the languages. But he was always connected to India. He was always connected to India. It was there, and he was always connected to India in the sense that he always probably thought of her freedom because he never wanted to serve the British. All these, what is happening in India, all these, this kind of a news, the status of Indian condition at that pre-independence was in fact told to Sri Aurobindo through various correspondences by his own father, Dr. Krishnadhan Ghosh. Look at the contradiction here. It was the same father who sent them to London and abroad with a condition that his children should not know anything about Indian culture. And the same man sends all the details, the paper cuttings, the news, etc. to Sri Aurobindo when he was there. So that is how he was always connected with Sri Aurobindo. I mean, with the country, India. And when he comes back to India, and the next 12 years with Sayajirao Gaikwad at Baroda, it was a golden period for Sri Aurobindo. It was a great period for his own studies, where along with the works assigned to him at a salary of 300 rupees, then he went up to 600 rupees, etc. As a principal, as a secretary of Maharaja. And during this period of 12 years, he also studied, he did study Vedas, Upanishads, the original text. He also developed almost authority on, he mastered several languages, Indian languages. All these things actually, they came into picture. And then this is when he was at the peak of his involvement also in the Indian politics. And almost at around 1904, let us say, he had this inclination, spiritual inclination. And by that time, with his own self-study, he studied what pranayama is, and then what is meditation, and all those things. And then he used to practice pranayama for hours together, meditation, without any initiation from any guru or any. It was all self-doing. And once this happened, and when this was happening, his brother Barendra Ghosh, Baren was with him, and then he was asking Baren that, bring some guide. So let me meet one yogi or somebody who can initiate me to the yogic experiences. And it was at this point in time, in January, in the month of January 1908, he meets Vishnu Bhaskar Lile. He's a Maharashtrian yogi. And then the Vishnu Bhaskar Lile, when he meets him, and then he wants to know, in fact, we can say the spiritual journey of Sri Aurobindo began from that day onwards, the day he met Vishnu Bhaskar Lile. And then he had a lot of conditions. Lile wanted 7 days of, at that time, Sri Aurobindo was at the peak of his involvement in freedom movement. He was almost a national leader of the National Congress. There were hundreds of people wanted to meet him. They always gathered around him at his place. But Lile insisted almost about 7 days of, without any disturbance. He wanted attention to be paid to him. So Sri Aurobindo agrees, and they move out to a house, to a friend's residence, where they get locked up for 3 days. And in these 3 days, it was actually they planned to get themselves locked up for 7 days. So then what is that? That is where the Lile starts. First step is to achieve silence. You have to silence your mind. What do you mean by silencing your mind? Then he says, there will be, when you close your eyes, a lot of thoughts come into the picture. You reject those thoughts. Don't give any attention to it. then finally reach a stage where no thoughts will come into the picture. Even if they come, they will just pass away without disturbing the silence. And then Sri Aurobindo achieves this in just 3 days. Complete achievement. You know, it is absolutely important to recall at this point in time. Sri Aurobindo says, what are the two most fundamental requirements for doing any sadhana or doing any yoga? You know, two important things. It is not only for integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo, but whoever, whatever faith you have, whatever sadhana you, whatever path you choose, two important things. The first important thing is the realization of the self deep within. You know, the realization of the self deep within is the first step. And what are the preconditions for this? The preconditions for this is very simple. First is the aspiration. The first is the aspiration and actually the rejection of thoughts which comes into it, and then complete surrender to the mother, to the divine, whatever idea you have, to the ideology. So this becomes, these are the preconditions for the realization of the within, of the self within, which essentially to talk about the realization, the bringing the psyche, it's the psychicization process, bringing the psychic in front. So this actually is, these are the, and the second step, this is the first step, and the second basic requirement is the realization of the self above. One is the realization of the self within, and the other one is the realization of the self above. And what are the preconditions for the realization of the above? The preconditions for the realization of the above self is silence, is the mind that is absolutely silence. You know, even the Ashtanga Yoga talks about 8 limbs: Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharane, Dhyana, and then Samadhi. These are the 8 steps which Ashtanga Yoga talks about. So these are the basic requirements. So if you really list it out, like the basic aspiration is the one. Aspiration actually begins with a thought or a will. And then once that gets converted, and then when the thought or the idea gets consolidated, it gets converted into belief. When the belief gets converted, it slowly transits into faith. When the faith converts and then gets consolidated itself, it turns into surrender. So this is how the 2 important fundamental aspects of for anybody, for whatever path we process. Now, once this silence is established in the mind, for example, we sit for meditation. We go through all these. Sri Aurobindo even talks about what is quietness of the mind, what is calmness, what is peace, what is silence. Even before attaining that state of silence, what exactly are the steps, what are the conditions before the attaining the silence itself. He talks very elaborately on what is quietness. Quietness is basically a restfulness. You know, we hear a teacher telling the children in the class, be quiet. It means what? It means no physical disturbances. So once that state is achieved, it is basically connected to the physical existence part of it. Then when it comes to the second step, when it slightly improves, it goes to a higher status, then it comes into calmness. When we say, you know, when we are emotionally charged, when we say, then we tell the person, no, be calm, be quiet, be composed. You know, what does it mean? That means it is not only now connected with the physical stuff, physical aspect of it, it is now connected with the emotional aspect of it. So that is where the calmness comes into the picture. So this state of calmness, being still, is actually, it's a tranquility, kind of tranquility. And so that is where you get where a part of your vital aspect of it, or the emotions are controlled, and then where the restfulness is also achieved. So the third aspect of it is peace. When peace is actually the Shanti, you will not get disturbed by any idea. Ideas may come and then go, the thoughts will come and then go, but you are completely protected from that. You're completely veiled in the sense that you don't get disturbed by any of the thoughts which are coming into you. Then the next stage is actually the silence part of it. There's silence. If you go to the silence, then you actually don't have the thoughts coming at all. So even if the thoughts come, they just pass away. You're absolutely in the same state of silence. And it is in this silence, and we have a state of pure silence also. And it is in this pure silence where Sri Aurobindo says the grace from the above, the realization of the above works. And then in that state, the state of nirvana or the pure silence, it is in that state the higher force works. And then even so the mental thinking, it stops, and then you start thinking from the higher level, at a higher level. So you actually get guided by that. And then Sri Aurobindo says, this is exactly what happens after going through the experience with Lile. Now, once this happens, Sri Aurobindo says that silence stayed with Sri Aurobindo forever. That state. So then he said, everything I spoke after that experience was from this state, from the above. So there was an incident immediately after this, after Lile, he completed the exercise with Lile. He had to go to Mumbai, and there was some kind of talks which were there he had to deliver, and he had blank, everything was blank. There was no, he was much above the mental level. So he asked Lile, what exactly do I do? I have to deliver a talk which is on the nationalism. So how do I do? So Lile tells him that you just go there and then look at the people, then you will start. And that is exactly what happens. Sri Aurobindo goes to Mumbai and he says namaskar to all those huge gathering, and then he speaks. He doesn't know what he spoke. I mean, in the sense that without his preparation, without any preparation, the entire flow of thought, entire expression, whether it is in speech or whether it is in writing, Sri Aurobindo, he said, then that state of silence, that state always continued with me. It stayed with me till the last moment. And when this happens, when this is silence, we have all experienced this when we sit for meditation, isn't it? When we sit for the meditation, initially we will be very restless. Something will be paining, we will be adjusting some hands, etc. So that is, we ourselves direct ourselves to be quiet. So from the physical unrest, we move into the stage of restfulness. And then there is a stage where everything, your breathing comes down, you get calm, you get composed, and that state you reach. And then slowly as you progress, as you start concentrating, and then you slowly arrive at some kind of a peace, you're not getting disturbed, there is a focus into the things. And maybe at the end, maybe during this course of meditation, there may be few seconds, few moments where actually you go blank. And that is where the chakras open. Especially the Ajna chakra, it opens. In fact, when we talk about chakra, Mother talks about 12 chakras. I mean, she always talked about 12 chakras, and instead of 7 chakras, 3 chakras above and then 2 chakras below, the 7 chakras, what we know. So all these chakras, when this meditation happens and in the state of silence, all these chakras will get activated. Now, when this is silence, stays for a long time, it becomes a siddhi. When we say that we achieve Siddhi, a Siddhi has been achieved. That means perfect, we are traveling towards perfection. The perfection in that activity has been achieved. So when in that state of silence, when we stay for a very long time, it becomes Siddhi. And then when you constantly stay in that state, and then it becomes realization. So when you start staying, so there are several layers of consciousness, several grades of consciousness, where you keep staying in that consciousness, so that every layer, every state, every stage, every grade of consciousness has its own world, has its own being. So that means when I rise, when we raise from one level to the other grade of consciousness, we actually identify ourselves with that being, with that being of that grade of consciousness. So we are actually at 1908 when Sri Aurobindo meets Lile. This is the first important milestone in the spiritual journey of Sri Aurobindo. Because if you remember the total transformation process, Sri Aurobindo talks about 3 steps. One is the psychicization, and the second one is the spiritualization or the universalization, and the third one is the supramentalization. At the time when we met Lele, everything was probably, he had realized, he came to understand, he realized the process of this psychicization. The first step, it was already there. He was convinced that there is only one supreme. He was convinced about the reality. Everything belonged without him. Ekameva Dvitiyam. That aspect was there with him. So the psychicization had already happened. The first stage had happened with him. Now this was in the month of January 1908. Then what happened? As he progressed, as we all know, it was in the month of May 1908, in the month of May 1908, he was arrested in Alipur bomb jail case. And then he stayed. He was, the solitary confinement was awarded to him. And then he was in that prison for almost 1 year. And this 1 year was a boon to Sri Aurobindo, because he had already learned pranayama. He had the initiation by Lile. By that, he had learned how to silence in his mind. He was already in that stage. And then, as he said, he stayed constantly. And there is one thing I just forgot to add. Lile wanted to continue with Sri Aurobindo for further initiation at that point in time. But when he was initiating him and then instructing how to go further in his sadhana, Sri Aurobindo tells him that I have this, there is one mantra which is repeating in me that I would like to tell you. That, and what is that mantra? The mantra for Sri Aurobindo, he tells Lile that the mantra to me is the instruction or the guidance by my deep within. It is always telling me to do this, do this, do this, do that. And then it is that time Lile says, okay, you continue with your inner self. You keep hearing to your inner voice and then go ahead. That is where Sri Aurobindo makes a very important statement that external guru may not be required. It is your internal, the inner self who can guide. And from that day onwards, it is for Sri Aurobindo, he was always self-guided. So that is where, now let us come back to the jail part of it. In 1908, this 1 year of confinement in the jail, he was practicing. We all know, we have all read about his levitation aspect of it. And what is important is, he was, in 1910, he resigns from the politics, but he was now still, he had to do some activity as far as the freedom movement is concerned. But most of the time, it used to go in his meditation, pranayama, and all other things. It is this time, it is during this 1 year, he starts seeing Vasudeva everybody. He says that I saw Krishna in him. Krishna was very close, very dear to Sri Aurobindo. He was always influenced by Sri Krishna. And because when Upanishads, when he did study Upanishads, Vedas, he also studied Bhagavad Gita. And from that, he had a great, great love for Krishna. And you know, if you remember, Mother also had love for Krishna. You know, Mother had also love for Krishna. So this, his love for Krishna, so it went, and then that is how he said, I saw Krishna everywhere. In the jail bars, he saw Krishna. In the jailer, he saw Krishna. In the prisoner, he saw Krishna. Everywhere, he saw Krishna. And what is this? This is actually the second step of spiritualization or the universalization. Without doing these things, you cannot realize what is the next one. So now, this is the second important spiritual milestone or the achievement or the Siddhi of Sri Aurobindo. The first step, the first milestone of the first Siddhi was the silencing the mind when Sri psychicization, bringing the psychic in the front and then listening to his inner voice was the first step, was the first achievement. The second one is this universalization where he saw Krishna everywhere. And you remember in the first step, he had realized that it was only supreme everywhere and then there is no second one. But that was only the first step. The second step is the realization that all in one and one in all. That principle, that realization comes as a second step to Sri Aurobindo when he is in jail. Now, on 30th May 1909, as soon as he comes out, that is the Uttaraspara speech, which almost is the end of his freedom movement. It is for the first time Sri Aurobindo openly talks about his spiritual experiences, how he encountered Sri Krishna, how Swami Vivekananda came and then guided him for several days continuously, how he was completely convinced about everything, and then how by that time he was already for him the path was very clear. What are the different grades of consciousness? What exactly is the goal? And where did the earlier yogas stop? All these things, I think, by that time, it was absolutely crystal clear for him. So in his Uttarpara speech, he talks about his experiences in the jail. And that is for the first time, he talks about his goal, his spiritual goal. And then on 4th April, he gets an Adesh to go to Pondicherry. You know, that is probably considered as the beginning of Sri Aurobindo's next step in the spiritual journey of Sri Aurobindo. So by the time he came, and once he comes to Pondicherry, on 4th April 1910. On 7th April 1910, he relinquishes all the activities connected with politics. He completely leaves politics and then completely gets into the spiritual, his path, onto the path. And then by that time, he is completely involved in his goal, and lot of his actually tapasya, we can say, starts once he lands in Pondicherry. This is 1910. Now, what happens between 1910 and 1920? Now, let us say in that 10 years gap, Mother comes in between, and then Sri Aurobindo's study goes on. Mother comes into 1914, and she meets Sri Aurobindo for the first time. Arya starts, and he writes several articles, almost 8 books in series at a time, completely different, and with his absolute clarity. And all these 10 years ago, you know, there is a letter written by Sri Aurobindo to his brother Barin, dated 7th April 1920. In this, he says, he very clearly, elaborately explains how the growth, how his spiritual growth was there in the last 10 years. So 24th April 1920, mother finally comes. And by 1910 itself, Sri Aurobindo was absolutely clear about different grades of consciousness, and then he had already reached the overmental consciousness. He had reached the state of overmind by 1910 itself. But then he probably, we don't know how the spiritual, what works in the world. He was waiting for the mother to come. So mother came, 1914. He starts with, again, gets engaged in several works, several writings. And mother comes in 1920 for the final. And 24th April 1920, when mother comes for the final and settles in ashram, and that is where the whole thing starts. And when all these, at that point in time, ashramites were essentially those people who had come along with Sri Aurobindo. When they came with Sri Aurobindo, so there was slight hesitance as far as accepting the mother, accepting foreign lady as her guru, as their guru. But for Sri Aurobindo, it was absolutely clear. Sri Aurobindo clarified that he says that she is the supreme, she is the consciousness force, and she is the creative force. And she is actually, because of her, the creation has happened. And then he called it supreme, he called her as Supreme Mother. And that is how everybody started slowly accepting mother. But then there was a time when people starts, Sri Aurobindo was very clear. Mother and I had the same goal, but only we were in two different places, and they were working in their own way. The approach, the spiritual approach, was to the same thing. And very interestingly, this 1920 goes, that is how the work goes. Slowly mother gets involved in smaller works. And then on three occasions, 15th August 1926, 6th November 1926, 15th November 1926. On these 3 dates, Sri Aurobindo talks to his disciples about the possible descent of higher light, higher consciousness. Especially on 3 months earlier, when he speaks about it for the first time on 15th of August 1926, he says there may be a descent of light, higher light, much before supramental thing happens. And now on 6th November and then 15th November, he makes it very clear. He says that this descent may be very soon. And mother obviously knows about these things. Mother also, if you go through all the literature and then the agenda, record of yoga and all those things, mother also knows very clearly that what is happening, what exactly is happening. And then she says, and interestingly, there is, what was many ashramites ask, what is the state of the mother, at what transformation state, level mother is on that day? We say that there is a descent of overmental consciousness in Sri Aurobindo on 24th November. But what happens to the mother? Sri Aurobindo very clearly says she herself is the Supreme Mother. There is no specific reference what exactly happens, but we can infer from Sri Aurobindo's writing, from subsequent writings of the mother herself, that before this 24th November, before the descent of overmental consciousness, mother actually tells during one of the discourses that she is in touch with the overmental gods. She is in touch with the overmental gods, And she asked those godheads, who is ready to come down and go through the pangs of this birth and rebirth, so that, and take forward the work of supramentalization, of establishing divine life upon earth? Which Godhead is ready? Mother jokingly says there was no Godhead who was ready to take birth as human being, to undergo this birth and then death again, and then wait for such a long time. You don't know that how long it will take for the supramentalization, for establishing the divine life upon earth. And he says it is only Krishna who accepts that I will come down. I will come down and then take forward this step to the next step of supramentalization. And that is how, so Krishna actually is Anandamaya. He is not and he is not a overmental God. He is not a Godhead. He himself is the, the Purusha. He himself is the Anandamaya, but he doesn't work directly. He works through the principle of our mind, where so many Godheads are there. And each Godhead is responsible for something or the other in the creation. And each Godhead is capable of establishing his own world, his own universe. But it is through these Godheads Krishna works, and then Krishna comes down to the spiritual thing. So on that, the day comes, and on 24th November 1926, what we mean by the descent of Sri Krishna consciousness is that Krishna's consciousness comes into the physical, actual body of Sri Aurobindo. And actually it is, so Sri Aurobindo becomes divine from that moment onwards. But he doesn't stop there. Sri Aurobindo knows, he says that had he stopped at that level, by the realization of Krishna in himself, he could have created another religion, another creed. He could have become another Godhead himself, because this is where most of the conventional yogas, but they stop, isn't it? Once the realization of God within you happens, it is the end, because you have become one with the God. And that is where all the conventional yogas stop. But Sri Aurobindo knew that this is not enough. So he tells his people, and in fact, on that day, what happened on that particular day, all of us have read. The mother, actually, this is not even revealed by Sri Aurobindo to anybody, that the Krishna's consciousness has descended into him, has not been revealed by Sri Aurobindo till such time, till almost about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, something like that. But when Sri Aurobindo comes out, mother sees him, and then mother instantaneously knows that something extraordinary has happened. And then she asks Sri Aurobindo, has it happened? Sri Aurobindo just says yes. Others, who were 1 or 2 people who were there, they don't understand what exactly is happening between mother and Sri Aurobindo. And when Sri Aurobindo tells the mother that yes, it has happened, and then it is the mother who sends words to everybody and asks everybody to call many people there. And to actually from this day onwards, and mother, they sit, it is mother, Sri Aurobindo tells the mother that you go first, and then she comes first, and then Sri Aurobindo follows. By that time, all the disciples there, devotees of Sri Aurobindo, came. And remember, there were only 24 people. On 24th November, there were only 24 people in the ashram. And all those 24 people gather, and Sri Aurobindo sits majestically, and mother sits on a small stool to his right. And whenever they sit for a long time in silence, and There are many experiences, all those 24 people, Sri Aurobindo in their own way, all of them have experienced. There are Champaklal experiences in a way, Datta experiences in one way. And then finally she claims that the God has descended into Sri Aurobindo, when everything is closed. And at that point, Sri Aurobindo tells the mother that this is not an event of fanfare. This is just an intermediary step. The way the other two realizations have happened, this is just an intermediate step. And then, dear friends, here Sri Aurobindo, when he writes, it is Sri Aurobindo's actual, most intense, decisive step in Sri Aurobindo's yoga starts from this day onwards. The mother and Sri Aurobindo completely, there is always a spiritual collaboration between them. And if they're exactly, in fact, Sri Aurobindo says that in one place about when this descent happens, and what is the next step? Next step is not only supramentalization. After this step happened, and Sri Aurobindo makes it very, very clear during that meditation, what he said, and then people are realized, the ashramites there, they want to take the blessings directly from Sri Aurobindo. They want Sri Aurobindo's hand directly on them. But it is mother's hand comes first and then followed by Sri Aurobindo's hand. And then people start talking about that it is through Mother Sri Aurobindo's force works. And subsequently at later stages, Sri Aurobindo, one of the disciples, asked him why you did not bless us directly, because the highest force descended into you directly, and then you could have blessed us directly. And then Sri Aurobindo makes it very clear, I cannot do that to you because you will not withstand the force. It is only through Mother you will receive my force. In fact, you will realize me only through the Mother. That is how so much of Mother becomes a part of this entire spiritual collaboration itself. Because without whom it cannot happen. So this is one simple step. Why did I say Mother's action? In all these steps, Mother was extremely active in everything. But 1926, what happened after the realization of this day, that becomes most important. How the whole thing carries forward. And it is on that day, we had 24 people. Sri Aurobindo completely declares that from this day onwards, he goes into seclusion. All the evening darshans stop. All the evening talks stop. Of course, there are some exceptions, some exceptions, but most of them, they stop. And then the entire responsibility, whether it is administrative or spiritual, he makes Mother, and he tells the Mother that Mother takes care of everything. So it is the spiritual guidance by the Mother, and it is the administrative guidance by the Mother. Perfection in everything starts by the Mother's action. And now, what is important? The important is the next step, the supramentalization. That is why did Sri Aurobindo gives everything to the Mother and then goes? Then he knows that the next step is far, far, far difficult. Far more difficult. So he knows now he has reached the stage of overmental stage. He has realized the overmental consciousness. He has seen the world. And that is why he says that this is not the last thing. Even in the overband, just imagine a spectrum of the overband. Okay, a wide spectrum of overmental consciousness. At the lower end of the overmental concentration, of that band, of that spectrum, is the intuitive mind, right? In the grades, the ordinary mind, higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, and then the overmind, and then supermind. Okay, and this in this broad spectrum, the bottom of the overmind is the intuitive mind, and there is also a portion of the overmind which is supramentalized. That means that portion of the overmind which is in constant touch with the supermind. That is the supermentalized overmind. So this entire spectrum is there. So Sri Aurobindo wants to go forward and then go ahead with this particular effort of realizing that supramental. And it is not just for Sri Aurobindo, it was not difficult at all to cross that limit and then go. But his aim was, the aim of integral yoga is not just an individual realization. But he had two challenges at that point in time. One is bringing down the supramental force. And second challenge for him was, when that supramental force comes, Sri Aurobindo was still in the mortal frame. Sri Aurobindo was still in the human frame, human body. He was still mortal. Whenever the avatar comes, be it Krishna, be it Rama, be it any avatar, whenever the avatar comes and takes form in a mortal manner, he has to go through the rules and regulations of those species. And it is not only human species. In Dashavatara, we see even the Varaha Avatara. Varaha Avatara, the supreme, takes form of Varaha itself. So there are two aspects. On one side, there is formless God, and there is a form, God with form. And in the entire manifestation, it is that supreme power, that supreme consciousness is with form. So when the avatar comes down, it is in this form that Sri Aurobindo also has to go through these rules, part of it. And when this is happening, and he knows that there are two challenges. If I bring down the supramental force down, the mortal frame should also be ready to receive that frame. These were the challenges. So what exactly to do? He has to transform or make his own body. That means every cell of his body has to be transformed to receive that supramental force. There were a lot of challenges which we do not understand, which we only can talk about it from the readings of Sri Aurobindo. It is to experience. Sri Aurobindo experiences that when you start bringing it down, when you want to transform your mortal body cells into that, make them capable of receiving that force, there's a lot of opposition. A lot of opposition from where? A lot of resistance. Lot of resistance even from the subconscious level, from the inconscient level, because the subconscious mind, which contains the entire previous history and probably remembers all those annihilations, all those pralayas, it resists because it doesn't want that annihilation. It wants to be very happy with that ignorance. It wants to be happy. It exactly happens to the mind. Mind also, whatever said and done, mind is ignorant, mind is divisive, mind is together with the emotions, together with the desires, together, it is supreme. No? In the lower nature, mind becomes supreme. So it is also very happy with the ignorance surrounding ignorance. It also doesn't want to come up, because when the entire supramental force comes down, there is no ignorance. There is a complete harmony. There are no dualities at all when that state comes into the picture. So there is huge resistance even when the transformation of the mortal frame had to take place. And simultaneously this was happening in the mother's body also. It was all happening. And then Sri Aurobindo tells the mother that both of us cannot be here and then work. One of us have to go and see that the body gets supramentalized. The mortal frame gets supramentalized. And that is where he takes the decision to leave his body on 5th December 1950. And then mother says, after Sri Aurobindo left his body, Sri Aurobindo's body was enormously charged with the supramental force. That's why there was no decomposition. There was so much of supramental force when the mother was prepared for it to receive, so that supramental force gets completely transferred into the mother's body. And from 1950 onwards, Sri Aurobindo is in his subtle physical, helps mother to supramentalize. And then for supplementalization, or for this light to descend down, it requires one adhara, or one form where it can come down. You know, you just imagine in still water, in still pond, if you drop a stone, you drop that stone at one point, isn't it? You drop a stone, it hits at one point and gets settled, but the ripples go long. And that is exactly what happens to the supramental force. You know, supramental force requires that one point where it can come, and that one body, the supramental forces come. And then Sri Aurobindo also takes their effort is not to bring down the supramental force and then transform the whole world instantaneously. No. You know, when the principle of when the Supreme Lord himself, the supramental consciousness, descended into matter, matter turned into life. And it took millions and millions of years for the matter, in the presence of that higher consciousness, to evolve into life. And same thing happened when mind got involved into life. Okay? It took several millions and millions of years and billions of years for the life to get completely mentalized and to reach this stage of advanced human species. So Sri Aurobindo and the mother, they were absolutely clear in their idea. They never wanted this supramentalization to happen immediately and then transform the world instantaneously. They wanted to bring down the supramental consciousness, the way mind appeared in life and the way the life appeared in matter, and then took its own time for the evolution to happen. But only Sri Aurobindo and the mother wanted to speed up this process. And that is why they went ahead and then brought down this supramental consciousness and allowed it to settle in the physical, subtle physical of the earth. And that is where the supramentalized force is waiting, is already established by Mother and Sri Aurobindo in the subtle physical of the earth. And when this happened, and this descent actually happens on 29th February 1956, Mother calls it as the Golden Day. So that we will talk about it when the Golden Day comes about it, when we talk about the details part of it. But these are actually some of the very important aspects of Sri Aurobindo's spiritual journey and what exactly happened on 24th of November 1926. So I think 1 hour.
It's okay.
So I think we have exactly, and today is the day when we need to recall this. And then we are all part of this. And then, you know, there is an interesting thing when Sri Aurobindo says, those who were also open to Sri Krishna, they have a direct access to Sri Aurobindo's yoga. You know, they have direct access. It is, Sri Aurobindo never says, come to me, come to me, come to me. No. He never called anybody. It is only those. And today's message, when she said, religion has a role to play. It's very clear. religion has a role to play. And what is the religion? Up to certain limit, the religion also should guide us, should take us forward to a level where we can go forward. But what happens is, in the process, to bring us to that a particular level, we have certain rituals, certain rules, regulation, dharma, and everything. We follow that in the ritual, in religion. But what happens is, these rituals actually turn into superstitions, and then we get stuck in those superstitions. And then we will not be able to go beyond that point at all. And these superstitions, which we do not understand, how do we go forward? But where Sri Aurobindo comes into the picture. And that is basically the difference between the religion, where it stops. We should know where the religion stops.
Ajit, it was a
we should also not make this a mere celebration. We come here on 24th in the morning, start meditating. It should not become a ritual. We should actually take forward this essence, this message from Sri Aurobindo, and then be a part of his journey. So with these few words, let me close today's talk. It's exactly, I've taken 60 minutes. If there are any questions, I am open to it. Thank you so much.
Ajit, this Srinivasa Murthy, I just want to say it was a fascinating narration of so many things which you knitted together and brought it together. And there is a lot that each one of us will have to take back and think about it and reorganize our own approach to the total spiritual journey. Thank you very much. It was very, very good.
Sir. Thank you so much. Thank
you. Sir?
Yeah.
This is Nandini Yogesh. Sir, we would like to have a series of sessions with Life Divine or any other works of Sri Aurobindo on Zoom, so that we benefit a lot. And this is a very humble request to you, sir.
Yeah, I think you have been requesting this, ma'am. But only thing is, due to paucity of time, it's very difficult for me to concentrate on this. But there are continuous talks which are happening from Sri Aurobindo Society Pondicherry itself. So we can probably, I will make sure that those links are sent to you. Several talks on Life Divine, on several links are there. So probably we can take part of it. But certainly, whenever it is possible for me, I will try to go, come forward and then share whatever little I know, because we are all in the learning process. So we need to exchange whatever we know. So it will be good for all of our growth. So let us try to do it. We will try to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Namaste.
Namaste. So if anyone else wants, please, you have to unmute yourself, sir, and then ask me the question. And you can switch on your video also. Yeah, any question?
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah,
I am Manjula.
Thank you, Manjula ji. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was like a revision class. The whole thing has been revised. Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, namaste. If there are no questions, we will end here.